Hello, everyone. I am Terry Kay of the Jewish Grandparents Network. Welcome to our pre-Shavuot event with the one and only Jane Shapiro, our friend, our dear friend, and a master Jewish educator. Our topic is the Torah of being a grandparent, how we live our values. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and giving us of your time. Quick shout out, a big thank you to Zoe Fleischer of Tiny Windows Consulting and to Sarah Reed, our JGN colleague, who are helping us facilitate tonight. If you have a question, please write it in the chat box or raise your Zoom hand, and we would love to take your questions throughout. Jane has dedicated a portion of the presentation to our Q&A at the end, where we'd love to hear from you. And if you're willing, we'll ask you to unmute yourselves, and we will shine a spotlight on you so you can share your question or your thoughts out loud. Now, may I turn the mic over to JGN's wonderful CEO and co-founder, and my very dear colleague, David Raphael.
Thank you, Terry. Good evening, everybody. I am really delighted to introduce my dear friend, Jane Shapiro. I have written in the past, when I introduce Jane, I always write, as a master Jewish educator, Jane invites us to use Jewish and modern text to look into our own hearts and our own souls. A teacher for the last 30 years, Jane is passionate about all aspects of Jewish teaching and learning. She's a graduate of the Mandel Teachers Educator Institute and Vision of Jewish Education Projects, and is the co-founder of Orot, the Center for New Jewish Learning. Jane is a graduate of Princeton University and received her doctorate from the Jewish Theological Seminary. In 2017, Jane received the Covenant Educators Award from the Covenant Foundation. We have shared and we will share a link to Jane's delightful Eli talk, the Torah of Bubbiehood. Jane is in fact Bubby to 5 and Mirza Hashem, God willing, 6 in the months to come. And we ask that you not reach out to Jane on Wednesdays, as that is reserved for Bubby time. On a sad note, all of us from the Jewish Grandparents Network share our condolences to Jane and her family on the recent passing of her brother-in-law. May his memory be a blessing. So Jane, it's really wonderful to see you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, David. It's always a pleasure. And I love looking at and seeing a group of my people. People who are grandparents, who think about grandparenting, and who want to really elevate this sacred role that we have been gifted with and to do it better. My topic this evening, we're going to be talking about the Torah of grandparenthood, but I want to frame it inside Jewish time. We are in the process of moving from Passover to Shavuot, that holiday that just like sandwiched right next to Memorial Day this year. But the holiday that just one line. Traditionally, it marks the time when the Israelites came out of Egypt, walked through the desert, and got to Mount Sinai and received the Torah. So the whole idea about receiving Torah, and celebrates all the pyrotechnics, the thunder, the lightning, everything on Mount Sinai. But more than that, more as an idea, the whole idea is, what does it mean that we have a Torah? What does it mean that there's a book of wisdom that is interpreted, that guides us, that we cherish? We pick it up and dress it in a velvet dress and carry it around and kiss it just like a bubby. And that we cherish it, and that we roll it and unroll it. And it's something it's important to us somehow to maintain at the center of our culture. But I don't want to say more about like what Torah means, but this is the holiday that invites us to think about, wow, what is my personal relationship to Torah? I'll say as an aside, as a Jewish teacher, there's a beautiful Hasidic practice for Jewish teachers on Shavuot to kind of do their own personal teaching Yom Kippur. How did my teaching go this year? It's a moment of truth. Did I deliver Torah wisely and well to my students? So maybe that's a plug for you to fill out the surveys at the end of the talk this evening. But what I want to do now, though, is think more about this whole idea of the Torah within us, and the Torah that not just comes from the mountain, but that comes from within us. That Torah may be an ancient book that we've received from our past and from our ancestors, full of wisdom, but it's also something that our lives are attached to, that our living experience also is in conversation with Torah, which is why it always needs to be interpreted and redone in every generation, because as our lives change, the Torah has to change in response to us. So we are always in dialogue with Torah. So when we add on to that the prism of, if part of my life or significant part of my life is being a bubby or just being a grandparent, how do those things come together? All right. How might we, each of us, think about how can I literally elevate what is important to me as a grandparent, what I do as a grandparent, not just my actions, my relationships, everything I do. How do I elevate that and make it sacred and not just call it behavioral or relational, that there's something really deeply holy and sacred. And I'm using what we tend to think of as religious words and say, bring it right into our everyday lives. With that kind of mindset, how do we elevate our roles as grandparents and make it sacred? And here's where we're going to go all together for the rest of this evening, turn it into our own personal Torahs. Add to the larger Torah of the Jewish people by making our own Torahs of, as grandparents, what wisdom do we want to treasure, make sacred, and hopefully pass along to our families and to the people behind us. So you heard Terry mention that a few years ago, I had this chance to do a talk, an Eli talk, and I'm going to confess something. When I was preparing the talk, I said, I'm going to prepare something about the role of Shabbat. And people, I had a whole Jewish educator, complicated philosophical thing. And my friend Mary said to me, that's not your talk. I said, what do you mean that's not my talk? I'm telling you what I'm going to talk about. She said, that's not your talk, Jane. You should talk about being a bubby. I said, are you kidding me? I'm going to blow my cover as a serious person. I said, no, you should talk about being a bubby. So it was from her encouragement that this talk called the Torah of Bubbiehood came to being. So what I want to do tonight is three things, actually. One, backstage a little bit of how the Torah of Bubbiehood got put together, show you some of the sources. I want to invite you to think about some of the ideas in the Torah of Bubbiehood that I created, but most important, while I'm talking through the things that I put into this video, is like, if I had to give 3 pieces of a Torah that I've learned from being a grandparent, how I connect my life to Torah in my experience and how I turn it into Torah, I want to invite all of you to start thinking about, what if somebody asked me to make a video, or if I had to make a Torah, what would be my Torah? What would be the things, the values that mattered to me that I could turn into Torah? Now, the good news is I'm here to help you turn it into Torah, because you could name values, but you might not know how to put it into Torah. So I'm hoping that Zoe is going to put my email into the chat box. So at the end, you're lucky to be here live and not in the recording. So you're going to have a chance to be able to turn your values into your own personal Torah. All right. So let's take a look at the first slide. When I did this talk, I said, what are the 3 things to me are of utmost importance? What is my Torah? And the first one is, I called it Tzimtzum. I talked about it in the video. And Tzimtzum is a mystical idea. It means to just contract and learn to make space. So how did I learn this? From this, and this also, because since Shavuot is coming and we read from the book of Ruth, it went from the very first grandmother I know about, which is Naomi. We have this man, Boaz, and Ruth. She becomes his wife. He cohabits with her. She has a child. And then immediately the women say to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer. He will renew your life. And he starts telling you, this child is born of your daughter-in-law who loves you and has bettered you to 7 sons. And these last 2 lines just jump out at me. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom, and she became its foster mother. And the women neighbors gave him a name and said, a son is born to Naomi. They name him Oved, the father of Jesse, the father of David. All right. So we can turn this slide off. So this is a kicker, because you kind of go, Naomi picks up the baby and she takes the baby. All right. Now, I'm pretty sure that many of you, when you first met your grandchildren or have impulses where you want to take that child. All right. And that's where the Torah piece of Tzimtzum came to me, be something that seemed critical for me to understand and really take into my own role as a grandmother as Torah, that I'm not the baby's mother. I will not be the direct person influencing, educating, and determining what this child's life is going to be. As a grandparent, our roles are different. And so it felt to me that that was a really critical piece of Torah that I needed to take in, but I also wanted to communicate to my children that I understood this role, that they were the parents, I cherished them, cherished the work they're doing, and that I would really be diligent and make sacred, always asking myself, is this a question for a bubby or a question for a parent? And so by attaching it to this larger idea of Tzimtzum, a mystical idea about God's presence in the world, where God deliberately in Kabbalah makes space in the world for human action. If any of you know about the expression tikkun olam, it's deeply connected to the idea of Tzimtzum, that God makes, if God's everywhere, God or goodness or whatever you want to call God, we're not talking about theology tonight, doesn't matter, but whatever you want to call the utmost sacred, makes no space for human action, human error, then we can't go anywhere in the world. And so I figured out that learning to contract space and back away and not follow my impulse, which is to grab the baby, okay, and say, oh, another baby for me. I know how to do this, done it a bunch of times, all right? That delicate moment was sacred and became the first pillar, I guess, of the Torah of Bubbiehood, or what I thought was important. Okay, let's, we're not such a big group. Anybody have thoughts or comments or questions before we go on to the next slide? I can't see all of you, but just in case.
Yeah, I was also told, like, from my daughter-in-law, like, you had your turn to parent, now it's mine. So I don't say anything anymore, They're now older, but when they were younger, she had said it. And like anything I did, like she made me think I was doing everything wrong. I said, well, I would never do anything to harm them. It may be a different way than you're doing, but know how I do it.
And it hurts your heart to hear it, doesn't it? A little bit. Yeah. And you can see here where it says, like, Ruth is your daughter-in-law is better than you know all the possible sons or children you could have. Ruth is a very devoted daughter-in-law, but she lets Naomi steamroll her. So the daughter-in-law, mother-in-law relationship is very tentative.
And with my daughter, I have to, she's her mother-in-law is a pediatrician, so she has more experience than me. So I remember when they got married, I'm never going to be able to have the baby, she'll have more experience. They'll want her to watch more than me, and she lives closer, so.
In the world of the Torah of grandparenthood, even a pediatrician is not the mother of that baby. So
Thank you.
Perfection, maybe that grandmother could determine. Okay, but at this deeply profound, I want to keep coming back, Torah level, sacred level, Shavuot level.
Thank you.
Has to back away. So that's good. All right, let's look at the next slide for the next piece of Torah of Bubbiehood. Oh, we're getting tikkun olam. Okay, Zman kadosh. Zman kadosh. You can all hear the word kadosh, like the word kiddush. And David alluded to this. He said, please don't email Jane on Wednesdays, okay? Here's part of the Kiddush for Shabbat. We're going to share in a little Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who creates the fruit of the vine. It's a happy drinking, like slightly altered experience when you include wine. There are many times we encourage people to feel like you're not in regular time. You moved into a time where a little tipsy, a little different, all altered is really important to focus on. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with commandments and favored us, given us in love and favor their holy Shabbat as an inheritance, a remembrance of the act of creation. This line holds a tremendous amount about what sacred is in Judaism. Sacred means actions. It means favor and love, okay, and an inheritance, something that is shaped so it can be passed along. If something's just good for you, but it's not available or obvious or something that someone else can learn from a Jewish perspective, it doesn't hold the same kind of sacredness. You could be the most personally pious person in the world, but if there's no actions that somebody can see you doing or that you do to somebody else, it stays in a box. We all know that's from you shall love the Lord your God and teach it to your children. That's another class here, because here we're talking about Shabbat. But sacred time, the blessing that we make on Shabbat is saying, move into an altered place, think about love, and think about actions that remember the act of creation, something that has never happened before, that's new and fresh and perfect. For this day is the beginning of all holy days, a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt, when no one owned time. When you were a slave, you couldn't determine what you were going to do. You've chosen us and blessed us among the nations and given us your holy Shabbat in love and favor. I always like to remind people that Shabbat isn't just a day on the calendar. Shabbat is a gift that was given to us in the Torah. And that's what we're saying thank you for when we make this. Thank you, Lord, who makes Shabbat holy and special. Okay. Now, if you see at the top, I wrote Zman Kadosh. I didn't call it holy time. I called it learn to separate, because the word kadosh really means separate. When we make kiddush, when we pick up that wine and say, move into an altered moment, we are separating the week of work from this special time, okay? When we say kadosh, kadosh, kadosh in synagogue, we tiptoe up, up, up. We separate from the ground in some way, okay? So I want you to think about separateness as holiness. Now, how does this, so we can turn this light up. What does that have to do with the Torah of Bubbiehood and with grandparenting? I am blessed and have been fortunate to spend Wednesdays, to earmark Wednesdays. Wednesdays is my Zman Kadosh Bubbie Day, okay? And that I pretty much as possible, don't let the outside world distract me from being with my grandchildren. Doesn't always happen, but I've got Wednesdays, but many of you probably have opportunities or time or crave more time to be with grandchildren. But the question is not just, do I have the time, but when I'm with my grandchildren, how am I spending my time? All right. And that's a Torah piece of grandparenting. I think many grandparents intuitively know this, but I don't think they realize that it's Torah. And that's why I want to talk to you about this, is putting your phone away and being in the present and recognizing that the sacredness of this time with a grandchild, however old they are, however many are there, whatever you're doing, is of primal importance in that moment. Because I would say that one of the things that grandparents understand this more than parents is that we don't have to be driving carpools and we don't have the 45 other things that parents have to do. We have the luxury of really indicating to the child that time with them is sacred, that they are sacred, that our relationship is sacred, and that we are making the effort to step into this world with them, step into time out of time with them. All right. So that's the second piece of the Torah that mattered to me, is that how would I communicate that to my grandchildren? That when I'm with them, pretty much the rest of the world doesn't matter. So I'm going to stop and take a couple questions or comments, see if anybody wants to comment on that.
Maybe I'll comment for a second. So two things. I want to recognize my co-founder, Liam Hendler, who's on the phone. I think I've learned through every day from her role as a grandparent. And if anybody makes grandparenting sacred, it's Lee. But I also think about when I think about grandparenting, I think about what Jacob said after he dreamed of the ladder, and that is, God is in this place and I didn't recognize it. And I try to say that to myself when I'm with my grandkids, that God is in this place and how could I be aware of it? There's a sacred moment and how could I be aware of that?
Yeah, beautiful. Hi, Lee. Nice to, I can't see you, but I'm glad you're there. Other questions, thoughts? Something that you do to let your grandchildren know that time stops when you're with them.
This is Lee. So one of the interesting things, I don't know how many people on the call have older grandchildren beginning to enter their teens, their tweens and teens, they're 8, 9, 10 and up. So one of the things that I started with my first grandchild was taking a special trip with her just by herself. She got to determine the destination, what we were going to do, why we were going to do it. And I did it at age 10 intentionally. I've since revised that, and I think 11 or 12 is a little bit better. And each of these grandchildren really looks forward to these trips, which we designed together. And that's a big part of it. And the time spent is time that they know it is just about us and our relationship. And mostly it's about them.
Beautiful.
I see.
No,
I was just gonna say, I see Renee, I think, had her hand up first. Is it okay if I spotlight her to join you?
Hi, Renee.
Hi, Jane. So good to see you. My grandchildren now I live in New York City. I have grandchildren in Los Angeles and also now in Rochester, New York, where they've moved after the pandemic. And so, like this past weekend, our grandson, who's 11, so I agree with Lee, there's a certain moment, when they're really, they're on that cusp of puberty. But I feel because they live far away, in terms of creating sacred time, I make it my business, and my husband does too, to be there for birthdays, to be there for every special occasion that we can. And when they come down, to do something special with them. So we went to the new Museum of Natural History, has a beautiful new building, and it's only been open about a week, and he was there and we explored. So it's just, given that they are far away, it has to be a commitment that we make to go there, to be there physically. We're on the phone and we're on Zoom a lot, but it's not the same.
Renee, I love that you use the word commitment, because if I were to say to people, if I were to say I'm going to talk about Shabbat, people start talking about its obligation, it's this or that. When we pivot and look at the idea of commitment from the perspective of a grandparent, the idea of earmarked, holy commitment and time, which is exactly what we would say about Shabbat, which we're not talking. That's not what we're teaching about tonight. Okay, it fits perfectly when we think about our role as grandparents. So that's why when I say, like, the Torah is inside of us and we learn from our lives about the wisdom of Judaism, it's to stop and just have an appreciative moment that inside our tradition has always been the invitation to drink a little wine. The world doesn't need you fixing it right now, and commit to this time of being present with your loved ones, your community, with yourself. Okay, it's always been there. But we can appreciate it at this whole other level as grandparents. So 2 other raised hands, Irene, and then Rana. Rana. Okay.
And Irene, if you want to, if you're okay with putting on your video, we'd love to spotlight you, but no pressure.
Oh, sure. How's my hair? Okay.
It's beautiful.
Great. I just wanted to say I'm very blessed to have 4 grandchildren who live very close by. 2 are, well, one will be 5 on Saturday, one is 5, one will be 4 in a few weeks, and then I have a 9-month-old. And I spend a lot of time with all of them. And it's very important for me to look them in the eyes and have them look to me in my eyes, and to build such a trust with them so that they know and I know that we all can talk about anything. And I was with the almost 5 and almost 4-year-olds today, and individually, I felt myself taking my face and moving it so that I was only focused on them. If a phone rang, I was let it go, and just like Shabbat, taking the breath in and letting it just settle around them, this big piece of space, so that we can talk about anything and do anything together. And that's how they respond to me, when I speak to them in their eyes and they speak to me in my eyes. And it's quite a blessing. It's really wonderful.
I want to add, since we're growing a list now of Torah of grandparenthood around this Shabbat commitment, Okay. You just are gazing, like looking right in the eyes, like you went like this with your hands. These are all things about like, this is the Torah piece of like yourself in there and gazing, and making time. Rana, is it Rana? Did I get it right, Rana? Yeah.
It's actually Rona.
Rona, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just want to acknowledge someone had written in there that it is easier when you're closer. I have grandchildren in Australia.
Whoa.
Not only is it geographically far away, but time zones, you know, it's very difficult. And they're, you know, preteen and teenage boys, which is a challenge, a big challenge to connect with. We used to have a time where we had a set phone call, a Zoom call, and, you know, my husband, we played Battleship online, we played euchre, we tried to do everything we could, trivia games, anything we could do. But because of the time change, the only times that are typically available are Friday night or Saturday night, which are Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, which as they've gotten older and gotten into sports and gotten into whatever, those have gone by the wayside. So I am just, you know, open to others' thoughts or suggestions, or just want to sort of acknowledge the challenge.
As you were talking,
I'm not hearing you. I'm sorry.
No, as you were talking, then Alyssa, then we'll let you jump in. I was just thinking this whole deal, what Irene said about gazing at them, you could also ask them, what would be a time when we can really just be present to each other? And
yes, and we have, and I will say, you know, it's, I mean, we find times, but essentially, it's hard. It's very difficult. They don't have answers for us. We've asked them, what do they want to do when we get together? When can we get together? You know, it's just, as I found, as they've gotten older, it's become more difficult. You know, again, teenage boys, 13 and 15. But you know, they're into trading cards. I'm learning about magic cards so that I can converse, right? Or they do video stuff. I'm trying to learn how to play video games, so when I do see them,
I bet dungeon. Yeah.
But it's and when we do see them, they're usually coming in, and there's a whole lot of other people that want to be with them as well. So it's a challenge. I just want to acknowledge that it's a challenge. So I'm open to other, you know.
Not always simple, but I also go like Shabbat comes every week because it's a repeated thing. Okay, Alyssa, did I get it right? Alyssa or Elisa?
Elisa. I have a 3- and 6-year-old granddaughters, and I spend a lot of time with the 3-year-old, but the 6-year-old has a routine of watching TV after a long day of school. And, you know, that's her mother's rules. So I just don't know what to do about that.
Well, that's
watch like TV with her.
Okay. It's sometimes it doesn't, it's about I'm emphasizing the Shabbat Zman Kadosh because it's about the time, and then it can be the activity. Okay. But then the first one, it also goes back to maybe it's a conversation with her mother. How might we use, you know, so if it makes it, if you're sitting, well, she's sitting on an armchair cuddled up next to you and you're watching TV, okay, for now. All right. All right, let's look at the next slide. This is the last slide. The third piece in the Torah of Bubbiehood that I thought was important is the word that I call sipur. Now, sipur is the same word as sefer, a book, or the sipur that we tell the story of the going out of Egypt. But in Yiddish, it means babi maisas. The word sipur, to tell a story, and the word maisa really means things that have happened. Okay. And I started thinking about who's the original grandfather who tells maisas. Here's Moses. And in the book of Deuteronomy is an entire book of Moses telling stories to the people and warning them. Okay. He's transmitting all this Torah. He's giving them Torah. What he's really doing is telling them stories, because he says, look, the day you stood at Mount Horeb, which is another name for Mount Sinai, and God said to me, gather the people that they may hear my words in order they may learn to revere me as long as they live on the earth, and may so teach their children. I want you to notice that passing along inheritance piece. In this way, this piece of Torah links to the one about Shabbat, something that's got to be teachable. Teachers call it teachable moments. You came forward and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain was ablaze with flames to the very skies, dark with dense clouds. Whoa, atmosphere. Moses is telling a very vivid story. God spoke to you out of the fire, and you heard the sound of words, but perceived no shape, but a voice. God declared to you the covenant. That means the relationship. And you were commanded to observe the 10 commandments, inscribing them on 2 tablets of stone. What a story. Okay. What a story. But here's the thing. Now we can turn off the slide. Okay. We don't need the slide anymore. The people he's talking to were not there at the mountain. He's talking to the children of the people who are at the mountain. All right. Moses is the most vivid storyteller. His goal is to implant memory inside the next generation, saying like, you were at Sinai, even though they would go like, I wasn't there. My father was there, I'm not there. Doesn't matter. The power of a sipur, the power of a bubby maisa. Maybe you just got to do telling stories of the family history to Australia, Rona. Maybe that's what you've got to do. Is something, is just the transmission of stories.
I will just say, if I may, I wrote down here, telling the family stories or history is exactly what I wrote down.
Beautiful. Yes.
Thank you.
So it's a really big role. It's a Torah piece for grandparents. It comes from our experience because we've lived longer than our children have, and we know more stories. And if we've been clever, we remember aunts, uncles, grandparents, moments in history that we lived through. Like if you told your 15-year-old, well, I was at Woodstock, I promise you they would pay attention. Okay. Or I was I remember this and that, and they're learning history. There are endless opportunities. And I want to say in the family room, the project that Terry's done, the website, there's endless pieces of things to learn from about telling family stories and the psychological importance of storytelling. Here we're just coming in from it's piece of Torah is passing it along. Moses did it first. So it's Torah. And he's telling the Torah about being at Mount Sinai. So I want to encourage all of you to find those gems of stories. Okay. And there are great resources. Someone has a hand up. Rich and Barbara. Nice to meet you. Hi.
Make sure to unmute.
I got that unmute. The thing that occurred to me as you were speaking, and also as we watched your video, is that it's multisensory in that some of the stories that we tell relate to the melodies of the Kiddush on Shabbat, or the smell of chicken soup being cooked. On Pesach, for the last 50 years, we start at the very beginning mentioning, and it becomes very solemn at that moment, but mentioning all of the aunts and uncles and parents and brothers that we've sat at this table before that aren't here now, and take a moment. But it's the multi-sensory part, taste. I mean, the taste of chrosis, the taste of freshly baked challah. I think that's part of a memory which is beyond words.
Yes.
As you were talking, as I said, there's a story that isn't necessarily what you would think of as being a story, and that we all do it. We all do it. We aren't conscious sometimes that we're doing it, but it's the multisensory act of knowing that our children and our grandchildren are watching us.
Yes.
So
that's the pass along piece. If you do something so it can be inherited. Could we hear your Kiddush story?
Well, the Kiddush story is that my father, had a very, well, firstly, I'm a Levite, okay, so we have a good voice, right? My father had a melody for the Kiddush that's a little bit unique.
Come on.
That he said that his father told him, and we do it every Shabbat, and my 10-year-old grandson phonetically can sing it. And like all of a sudden, I don't know, it's about a year ago, and he said, let me do the Kiddush. And he's, you know, he's still a little bit past his alphabet, but he doesn't know Hebrew. His bar mitzvah today is, you know, now about a year away, but he just almost on pitch to do the Kiddush.
Sing for us. Come on and sing it for us.
What?
Will you sing it for us?
Go Rich, go. Go Rich, go.
Well, actually, there's two melodies. One is a Pesach melody, which is really weird in that I've never heard, it's not Sephardic and not Ashkenazic, although we're Ashkenazic. It sounds Sephardic. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, da 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 ba da 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 da. It's Sephardic, but our Kiddush on Shabbat is more of an Ashkenazic melody. So
I love that you've embellished your stories with music and smells and tastes. And I mean, I would say this is a huge pillar of this Torah. And it can be your Torah too, just to become the best storyteller you can with your grandparents, with your grandchildren, the best, whatever, puppets, costumes, shticks, it doesn't make a difference, okay? Because inside the stories, you can embed so many values, okay? So many values and so many pieces of history and so much in your heart, like what matters about continuing to be part of the Jewish people. You can embed those things in the stories and pieces of yourself. And so good storytelling, having a Bubby Misa is great. So
Karen, I see. Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Zoe. I'm
gonna add you up here, Karen, if you want to say your piece and make sure you unmute.
Nice to meet you. Hi. Hi. Karen, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
How's that?
Ta-da.
Better than ever. Wait, you muted yourself again.
Push the space bar.
It is not.
Push the space bar and you'll unmute.
It says push the space bar on your computer.
I'm on a cell
phone. Oh. All right.
Karen, if you're, go for it.
All right, just stay with me for 1 minute.
Don't press anything, you're good.
I'm good?
You're good, don't press anything.
All right, I won't touch it. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. My name is Karen. I want to thank Rona for bringing up about being a long distance. I'm a long distance Bubby. A little different. My two granddaughters are very young. One is 3.5 and one is 1.5, and they live in Israel. Mm-hmm. So the similarities are, yes, the time zones are rough and Shabbat is over. I mean, it's just, that's one issue. So I'm trying to find my way. And it's also, I want to say, it's also another layer of culturally.
Yes.
It's a little different. They live in Yafo. I've been going twice a year. I try on the phone, but just developmentally, the 1.5-year-old really just wants to shut the phone off with the buttons. And if we can hit it, I don't. So I am looking for a little help, maybe in, you know, a very wise rabbi once mentioned to continue only in English. So I am speaking English with them because they get Hebrew everywhere in the Gan. But I guess I'm thinking more about affecting a role, an active role. I think I have a hard time with technology, so I can only imagine when they're very young, do I not look like a cartoon character to them?
Well, the good news is the 1.5-year-old is probably very tech savvy and will not be a 1.5-year-old forever.
Okay.
My 2.5-year-old using the mouse on the computer, it freaked me out. So, I mean, they technology natural to him, and we just had, but pieces, the relationship develops over time. Okay. What you're doing today is just a piece of where the relationship is going. All right. So I want to hold on to that in some way. Renee, I see your hand up, and David. So But now you're on mute.
Yes, I know. I know I spoke already, but I'll make this short. When I was in Los Angeles recently, we have a 3.5-year-old and now 7-year-old. And what was wonderful is I was there by myself. My husband wasn't on this trip. And in my bed in the morning, I was up very early because of LA time, and the kids were up early, and the little one would crawl in my bed, and we would have conversations. And so I was thinking of the Baba Misa as something that we often is something that we, the Bubby, transmit to the kids, but they really have their own stories to tell.
Oh, thank you.
And I thought, what she said to me, she's 3.5, but she's so observant. All I had to do was just start out like, remember what we did yesterday about blah, blah? And then she would like add and tell me things and make little jokes. The whole thing was really a dialogue that I did not expect at first. And I just treasure it. It's their stories.
Yeah. David, I'm going to call in a second. Maybe we can problem solve for Rona and Karen. Maybe storytelling with your grandchildren. Like, I want to tell stories of life in Australia. What's life like in Yafo's a very funky place to live. Okay. Maybe the part of this is, Jonah, it's a funky, there's stories to be told. And so maybe getting the children to tell stories. I'd love to know what it's like being a teenager in Australia if I was, and so I had never thought before about that storytelling, the children's storytelling. Thank you, Renee. It's super. Opens the dialogue in both directions and even when we're not proximal. So and one of the things about the Grandparent Network is that there's always people to share ideas and resources and to my grandchildren live far away and to support one another. I think it's one of the really important goals of the Grandparent Network is to be that forum. So David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think all my grandkids are in Baltimore. And I think we'd all like our grandkids to be nearby, or next door or down the block. But the truth is that if holidays and Shabbat were every day, they wouldn't be as holy and they wouldn't be as special. And so one of the things I think about is that how to make our time together and our space profoundly special, partly because it is time limited. So my kids, we used to spend 2 weeks a summer at my in-laws' house in upstate New York. And that was one of the few times that my kids saw them, and they had profound impacts on their life because they were able to do things during that period that were extraordinary. So my father-in-law used to take nature walks with my daughter, who's now a developmental biologist.
Oh.
We've created a whole room in our basement for our grandkids who are here 2 weeks a year, because this becomes a special place. And it's, when Bina comes, we do the playground tour. And so we have these annual traditions. So we would all love our grandkids to be close by, but conversely, there's a kind of a hyper level of specialness that we could create when we do see them.
Good. Okay. So here's what I want to do now. My 3 pieces of Torah that grew out of my experience as grandparents, that might be Torah for you, might be from your lived experience or something you want to pursue. And I gave them Hebrew names: Tzimtzum, Zman Kadosh, and Yiddish, Babi Misa, or Sipor. What I want to invite all of you to do this evening now is to come up with your own 2 or 3 values. What is of utmost importance to you? Okay. And let's see. And this is where, having my email, I would love to help you put Jewish language to it and say, here's why I see this fits with X. All right. And so you will have your own Torah on Shavuot to pass along to your next generation. Okay. Now I'm going to give you 2 examples, and then I'm going to ask you to open up the chat box and start to put some ideas on that. And, maybe while you've been thinking about this, you kind of go like, no, that may be nice for her, but that's not mine. Okay. Or I really like that idea. But let me give a few others that might work. I think the idea of caring about community could be a really important value that someone lived their life with integrity and wanted to pass along to their grandchild. And if they call that the Torah of grandparent, for me, is about kehillah, okay, then it becomes Torah and not just a nice value or a nice thing to do. All right. You do not need to be Yiddish fluent, Hebrew fluent, deeply knowledgeable in Jewish texts to add simple Hebrew words to things that we call values. And like the word kadosh, which we call sacred, but then we go, oh, kiddush, kiddushin, kadosh, kadosh. The minute we add, it's the nature of Hebrew, most Jewish languages, okay? It's the nature of Hebrew to have more going on underneath the word, more history and more content than just what the word means. And for sure, the word kadosh is way better than holy, okay? Kadosh means separate, and okay. So the word kehillah, we call our synagogue sometimes kehillah. There's a historic institution called a kehillah that now is called a federation, something that takes care of everybody. So that's what I'm saying. When you pick a value and then we help you find the Jewish word for it, that's where you're turning your values into Jewish grandparenting values. I'm going to give one more example. Let's say philanthropy is something that really matters to you. That is a core value in your life that you would hope that your children and grandchildren grow up to be philanthropists. When you call it philanthropy, that's a nice word. It comes from philos anthropos, love of human beings, okay, in Greek. When you call it tzedakah, now you've turned it into something that's a Torah, okay? Tzedek means justice. Tzedakah is the way that we use resources of all sorts to right what is wrong in the world, all right? Now, all I just said was 3 sentences, all right? But that's deep Torah, and there's a lot to be learned about that. So I want to encourage you that you can all do it, okay? Like, what's her name? Rosie the Riveter. You can all do Jewish values of kindness to animals. Good. All right, so let's take a look at the chat box and see what people are putting in there. Kindness to animals is called tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. The word tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. Okay, let's see. I love this. Let's see what else. Zoe, do you want to shout some out?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. I'll jump in. We have kindness to animals and all living. Oh, you said that. Sorry. Respect for one another.
Okay. Respect. Let's say respect. I mean, kavod. The word kavod is a fantastic Jewish word. It means wealth. It means the cloud of glory that God dwelled in, okay, that carried the people through the desert, the cloud. That's called a kavod. And it means honor, like kavod, honor, kavedet avicha v'emecha. It means the parents that you're supposed to honor, you honor people, is to give them their weightiness and the gloriousness of their existence. It's way better than honor, okay? It's kavod. Then when you read the 10 Commandments, you go like, oh, I know that word. It's just one word, kavod. Okay, beautiful.
Lift up Wendy, her internet's too slow. So she has a comment from a bit ago, but I think we can put it into the Torah of Bubbiehood. I think we can grab it. She mentions that she has 5 granddaughters, 2 close by in Israel, and the kids have a weekly meal with them and sleep over once a week. And in Israel, they're the ones that hop into her bed, and she's also a caregiver of her 97-year-old father-in-law. So they sort of pass stories along through this multi-generational family model. I feel like we could definitely turn that into to a value somehow, like intergenerational relationships or
the door. First of all, as Ezra, being a helping person. Ezra, there's a person in the Bible with that name. He's the person who brought public Torah reading to the Jewish people. I'm telling you, the minute you get like one word, it goes in 25 directions. Hebrew's great, like Lador vador, okay? One generation to another, that kind of
taking care of the environment. Yeah. Margie and Steve.
Yes. Taking care of who wrote? Oh, Lee wrote forgiveness, teshuvah. I love this. Forgiveness has the word give in it, right? Teshuvah has the word return in it. Okay. Teshuvah, being a teshuvah person is somebody who, both for themselves and for others, enables people to return to their authentic best self. I'm going to say that it's not Rosh Hashanah right now, but when you do teshuvah, you're returning to your best self. Now, what is it like to have that as a value that you talk about with your grandchild? Grandchild misses the mark, does something wrong, breaks something, hasn't had a good day in high school. You can say, it's okay, because we value teshuvah. And it's not just you've done something bad, you have to correct it. It's let's think about returning to our best self, lashuv. It's also a key word in the Megillat Ruth that we're going to read, shovna. Naomi tells to her daughters-in-law, shovna, go home to your families in Moab. What about, I don't have anything for you. And Ruth is davka, she clings to her. So that word shuv appears in all kinds of beautiful places. Being shuvah as a value is a beautiful thing.
That's great. I love that.
Including new people in your group, which I think is very relevant for especially younger kids as they're learning to be social.
Yeah, including people. The word that's coming to my mind initially is just ohel, a big tent. Ohel. I value ohel, a big tent. Can we just pick up the flaps more and more and more? Okay, more and more and more, and include more people. But I'd have to think about it because probably there's other words that would fit as well too. So,
Jane, Marsha asks a really pertinent question. Are you recommending talking about values in Hebrew?
I'm recommending that first thing we start with ourselves. I said the following: the Torah is inside of you. Don't go pick some Hebrew phrase that you pulled out of a book that you don't know what it means and it means nothing to you and go like, what? I don't know. The value, and that's why I'm asking you, like, what's something that I told you my 3 values and it turned into a video. Okay, that's all. But if somebody were to ask you the 3 things that are rock bottom, I wake you up in the middle of the night, what's core to you? Put them on a piece of paper. And then when you put a Hebrew name to it, 2 things can happen. One is by looking up that word and checking out all the other ways, things that it might mean, you'll learn some stuff about how things in Judaism fit together. History, Jewish law, culture, recipes, okay, how things fit together. The other is you have in one word a way to transmit, to give the Torah to your grandchild in one word. Okay, say like, well, I want to talk to you about kavod. Okay, how's kavod going? And that kind of a piece. And just it tilts, it pivots, it adds the sacredness by calling it Torah and not just values. Values can be what something weighs in the grocery store. If it's, did I get my money's worth? Is this or that? A mitzvah, a Torah carries an enormous association of love and sacredness and beauty. And why should we not use that word Torah? Because that is what we're talking about. Our lives, we've learned things in our lives about what matters. That's what Moses was telling the people, is that here's the stuff that matters, okay? Don't forget it. That's what all the book of Deuteronomy is. So we're Moses. We can also say to the generations that are coming after us, this is deeply important, this is what matters. And this is Torah, and pass it along, all right? So that's why I feel like that the Hebrew just shifts something. Hi, Jane. Nice to see you.
Hi, Jane. It's been a while. The 3 words that I think of is teacher, guide, and listener.
Yes. I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry. Yeah.
The 3 words I think of is teacher, guide, and listener. And I'm all about teaching and help guiding and always listening to what the kids are saying. And they're long distance. They're in Jersey.
So Jane, you are a Jewish educator and you didn't know it. Teacher, the word morah is the same as the word Torah. It's the same. The person who guides you, who works with you to help you find that Torah, is also called a morah. So Torah, guide, could be. It's also in. I apologize for the noise coming in. It's one of my sons. A guide in Hebrew is a moreh derech. You can hear the word morah. It's the same word. Derech. It's the teacher on the path. It's the person who teaches you a path. Now, I especially like this word because Maimonides, I'm telling you, Jewish history comes up right away, who lived in the 12th century, wrote a book for an entire community who were utterly confused about what to do with Jewish law and Jewish belief. They were totally confused. And he wrote a whole book called the Moreh Nevuchim, which we call the Guide to the Perplexed. And people call it the Moreh, all right, the guide, all right? So that Maimonides, whose name was also Moses, was a huge grandparent teaching Torah to the next generation. So I love that you use one. And the word listen, you know what is listen? How do you say hear or listen in Hebrew? You all know this.
Shema.
Ma. Shema. Listening, being attuned to somebody. That's a Shema mentality, or Shmi'ah, okay? My colleague teaches all kinds of classes just about this, being an attuned listener as a Jewish sacred practice, all right? You've got 3 that translate so quickly and beautifully into Hebrew. You're good. You're golden. Who's got another
Jade,
one?
before you go there, this is a public service announcement. We're due to be on between 7 and 8, and that's our commitment to our friends. But I can't recall when we've had such a rich and wonderful conversation, and I kind of refuse to turn off the camera. So I'd love to continue for a few minutes. Are you available, Jane?
I can stay for about 8 more minutes, but then I do need to respond to my son.
Okay. That sounds totally fine. And for all our other friends, if you need to jump off at 8, we totally understand. Meanwhile, we'll keep going for the next 8 minutes.
I do want to make the offer, though. Zoe has put my email on there. I said, do people do that? She goes, I don't know. If you get off this call or 2 days now and go, I figured it out. My thing is Jewish cooking. I value food. Okay, now what do? I'm inviting you to email me and say, I heard the talk. Here's my values. Can you turn these into Hebrew Torah for me? And as a special service, I'm happy to do that for you. The next few days I may be busy, but I'm really pretty good about returning emails. I try to be. So I will, and it will be in the follow-up. So it's an invitation to, first of all, continue thinking about this because Shavuot's a couple weeks away, but also to personalize it, to really think about the Torah inside of you. Sometimes takes a moment. It doesn't just pop in. Okay. Some of us are like, I got it. And other people need to meditate, walk, think about what's really important to them. So
Rona had 2 that were super interesting. Her first was liaison to family's history, storytelling. She offered Tzipor maybe, but was wondering if there was a more descriptive word, and then talked about being a safe place for their grandchildren, and a word maybe. So a word for storytelling and like liaison of family history, and then a word for us being a safe place.
So off the top of my head, you all can steal Bubby Misa. You can steal it if you're a Bubby, or Sipor. You can still Sipor, but when you're talking about history and family, I would also add the word Zikaron or Zocher, which is memory. Okay. Memory, from how many psychologists? I see at least one psychologist on the screen. I'm smiling at her. She's smiling. Okay. The memory is an extremely powerful tool. And that's just honestly, like, part of why we do what we do is we want to be remembered. So Zikaron is really good, and it will take you in all kinds of places as a important value, and as a piece of Torah. We say all the time in the high holiday liturgy, we ask God, Zocher Habrit, God, please remember your covenant with us. So I would put Sipor next to Zikaron. So it's both the telling of the story and how stories activate memory. That would be a really good path of exploration. Okay. Was there another one, Zoe? Yeah.
Like being a safe place for your grandchild.
Okay, so safety in Hebrew is bitachon. Bitachon, labetach, which means assurance. It means safe, but it also means confident. If you wanted to talk about the value of making people safe with you, okay, I would use the word bitachon. Okay, it's the word for security in Israel. So it's also a religious, Hasidim talk about bitachon, is having confidence and safety in your religious life. You have confidence that God is looking out for you. So I just want to say, like, just inside that word bitachon, just went in about 3 different directions: personal safety, okay, caring for others, but also in a religious, spiritual connection. All right. So it's a good example. Got some more?
Is there a word for joy or fun?
Oh, simcha.
Oh, simcha, of course.
Simcha is the best word. Simcha is the best word because it's one of those words, Renee, that again shows us the finesse and difference between a Jewish way of looking at the world and the rest of the world. I often tell my students, when somebody says they've been invited to an affair, I was kind of go like, what was that? Okay. When we have a party, when we invite people, okay, when we feed the community and give tzedakah and celebrate, what do we call it? We call that, I'm going to a simcha, okay? Simcha as joy and happiness is way more than I feel happy, okay? It's way more than that. Simcha as a Jewish, we have, and the rabbis talk about simcha shel mitzvah, the performance of doing a good act or acting out your value brings simcha. It's a profound, on the one level, it's a profound spiritual joy, satisfaction, but it's also a simcha because in general, simcha means reaching out to others and expressing it. So it's very not a narcissistic emotion, like I feel happy. So I think joy is better than happiness. Simcha, simcha is a great word. If that's your life value, lucky grandchildren. It's awesome. Who's got another? I'm learning.
One more question or statement or thought from our friends, and then we are going to sign off, Jen.
Jane, before you do, Terry, I'm sorry. Can you just tell us how to print out the chat?
We will. Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to follow up with everybody tomorrow. We save the chat because we are recording this. We will post the recording in our video library, and we will also email you the chat transcript. Would that be good, Rich?
Yes.
Okay.
Here's my last. I want to, unless there's any more questions, I want to wish you all a very happy Shavuot this year, and a chance to take this receiving the Torah Mount Sinai. I don't know what to do with that. Eat cheesecake, blintzes. I don't know what to do with that other than cholesterol. Okay. But I hope all of you have a way to bring together this beautiful part of our life that has so much potential to your own idea of personal Torah. Okay. And that it makes for you a much more meaningful holiday season for you. So, and thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, and for your menschlichkeit, and for just your generosity. And to all our friends, thank you so much for joining us. We will follow up tomorrow. We'll send you the recording that you're free to share with your friends. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a most wonderful evening.